What's up? What's happening? What's up? What's happening? It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Always alive as well on the free Odyssey app. And yeah, that is the Roosters music. Chris Russell hanging around. He switched sides of the desk here. Appreciate you, sir.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm good. I had to run in here and get ready for the show.
Yes.
I was telling you in the break there, Darius from the Grant Danny Show was telling me nice things. He enjoyed something we did. And then I was like, thank you, but it's 3:59. I have to go do my show now. Next time you want to tell me things that are nice, please leave more space to inflate my ego.
What did he like?
So we did a roundtable with a couple of podcasters in the DC Wizards space.
Yes.
And apparently people liked it.
Yeah.
Because, it's really, there's actually not, I was talking about this with a couple people today. There's not that many NBA draft people out there. Like, if you want NFL draft coverage, there's 1,000 people that actually legitimately know what they're talking about with the NFL draft, that have watched prospects, have a good feel for it. You know, like from the Dane Bruglers down to the podcaster blogger types. You know, guys that are like high school coaches, but actually also doing media and know what they're doing. Like, there's everything. The NBA, I probably in part because it's like an international deal in a lot of ways.
Yep.
Like, it's harder to scout. There's less tape available in some ways because it's like high school or 1-year guys. Yep. I don't know. It's also more of a crapshoot draft in general, and like the impact of there's like 5 guys that are going to matter in any class. I don't know. I don't know what it is.
Was it Chad Ford? Was that the guy's name that used to be a pretty big ESPN draft
awesome.
insider? I don't know what happened to him. I think he got let go during one of their budget cut periods. And he doesn't seem to be a part of the mix unless I'm missing him. I mean, Gavoni and Draft Express obviously have
they got
taken
bought
the
out
bell
by
by
ESPN.
Yeah, exactly. And they're kind of the guys that everybody, looks towards because Woj and Shams Charania, as good as they are at breaking NBA stuff, they're not breaking down these prospects or really studying them. And obviously, they'll be a part of draft coverage. And, of course,
well, that's the thing. Is like there's a definite chance that the biggest thing that happens during the draft is like Paul George gets traded.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I was talking, I don't know, you were busy, obviously. The Wizards could, I suppose they could trade up to number 1. They could trade up down from number 2. They could just make a pick and then, as we saw last year, right, with the switcheroo with Indiana and Bilal Coulibaly, and we've seen plenty of times, right, they might take a player, and then all of a sudden a trade offer comes in for that player afterwards that they weren't anticipating, and they could, get something and maybe get another guy that they like just as much and get something else in return. And if you're looking long term, right, that should be kind of how the Wizards should operate. They're not one player away.
Right. Well, and also just the general crapshoot nature of any NBA draft, but especially this one. Like, if the Spurs call you and they want Reece Archie at 2, or they want Sarr at 2, or whatever they want, and they're willing to give you 4 and 8, like the math tells you, the analytics tell you. Oh, now you believe in analytics. See what I just backdoored? I got Chris Russell to believe in analytics,
when it makes sense,
you thought you were here to talk about Game 7 in the NHL, and I just duped you into agreeing. No, but realistically, you're just better off taking more shots. And so I think Wednesday night's going to be pretty fascinating. Because there is a lot of stuff about the Spurs potentially wanting to come up, and but then again, like the 2013, this is my go-to line, is the 2013 draft is arguably the worst draft in NBA history, unless you're the Milwaukee Bucks because you drafted Giannis.
Yeah.
And every single NBA draft in the history of the entire thing has produced an All-Star.
That wasn't Anthony Bennett, was it?
That was the Anthony Bennett
That was
draft.
Anthony Bennett, okay.
Yeah. I worked that draft with Chuck Cooperstein for ESPN Dallas.
There you go.
We sat there before on the desk going, Giannis we found a pronunciation in like a New York Times article. Antetokounmpo.
It took me about 6 years after he was drafted to actually be able to pronounce his name right. I just call him the Greek Freak.
It's a tough one.
Or Giannis.
So we did bring you here today because you, sir, king of more hockey. Everyone should talk about hockey. Tonight is your night.
Yes.
Tonight is your night.
It is. It's big night.
We could have the first time since 1942 a team coming back from 3-0 in the Stanley Cup final to to win. Now, that stat is correct, right? Since 1942 in the final, there's been like a first-round series or two in between that?
Yes. Well, most recently was the L.A. Kings, I want to say 2014, 2013, one of those years, where they were down 3-0, completed the comeback against San Jose, I believe it was, and won that series 4-3. But that was in the first round. Yeah, since 42 for the Stanley Cup final. And, oh, by the way, I'm just going to spoil the party right away. I don't know if it's going to happen.
Well, bold, it hasn't happened since 1942. Bold prediction there, Rooster. But here would be my question, because actually Anthony and I talked about this during the NBA. There was one of the series that started to look like it might get a little squirrely for a team that was up 3-0, and it was kind of like, what would need to happen, right? What needs to happen for an NBA team to come back from 3-0, which has never happened in that league, and it's kind of like, well, the biggest thing would be an injury. Team, in that third game, loses a star player, or maybe a star player comes back in the fourth game, and then that changes the whole dynamic of the series. What changed the dynamic of this one, where Edmonton is down 3-0 and all of a sudden finds himself tied at 3 with Florida going into Game 7?
It's a great question, because I thought Edmonton started out the series playing a more freestyling their style of hockey, even though they got shut out 3-0 in Game 1 by Bobrovsky of Florida, who stood on his head. They outshot Florida 2-1, like 32-16 or whatever it was, something like that, in Game 1, and they were shut out, right? And it almost seemed like in Game 2 and Game 3 back in Edmonton, they were tight, and they were trying to play this like defensive, like, kind of like don't make mistakes kind of thing or game. And then Game 4, down 3-0, season on the line, everyone counting them out, and who wouldn't, right? It's like, let's remember we're the Edmonton Oilers again. And let me give you just a quick example. They started off the year, Craig, I think it was like 2-9-1 or something like that. They fired their head coach. They were here in Washington the day after Thanksgiving. I think they had fired their coach earlier that week, or maybe like a week before. They had won one game and something like that, like real quickly before the game here in Washington. Well, they destroyed the Capitals 5-0. Connor McDavid had 4 assists. That was the Edmonton Oilers. When they're skating, when they're doing what they do with the amount, it's just more than Connor McDavid. Leon Draisaitl has got to step up, and who's their second best player, or their 1A best player, got to step up. But that's the way they started to play in Game 4, and so far, with limited exception, they haven't taken their foot off the gas pedal since then. But they've also been able to be responsible in the nets, where you have a 25-year-old kid, Stuart Skinner, who's an Edmonton native. Imagine that, right? I mean, arguably the most important position in hockey, playing in his hometown, and now one win away from completing this miraculous comeback, historical all time. But also they've killed penalties at like a 94% clip. So they've done it both ways, but they've played a more free style, more their style, which they've gotten back to starting in Game 4.
For McDavid, this would be his first Stanley Cup win if he gets it. Widely considered the best player. I don't even know. Is it like a unanimous type of thing?
I mean,
he's best player in the league. There's not.
No doubt.
This isn't like a Giannis, Jokic, Embiid situation where it's like, I think it's Giannis. And
listen, there's other
McDavid.
great players, obviously, but Connor McDavid isn't a stratosphere all by himself.
So,
and he was before this playoff and this final.
So what would it mean for him, not just to win it, but to do it this way if he becomes the guy who leads the charge of the greatest comeback in the history of the sport since the Second World War?
I mean, listen, it doesn't make him any better than he already is regarded, right? We just talked about that. But what it does is it cements your legacy in a way that, like, a guy like Alex Ovechkin, just for our home audience, wasn't able to cement his legacy until 2018, 13 years or whatever it was into his career, right? It gets you in that lexicon, that grouping of guys who have won a cup. Now, obviously, you got to win more cups to be considered like the absolute Michael Jordan, Wayne Gretzky GOAT of all time. We'll tackle that in a different way. But if he gets that first cup, that puts you in a group that not everybody obviously is in. Number two, if you do it the way they've done it, Craig, to come back from 3-0 and, again, to become the first team since 42 in the Stanley Cup final. And, oh, by the way, to do it the way he did it in Games 4 and 5, and if he has a big game tonight and they win, again, it puts you in rarefied air. Now, what's interesting is people might not remember this from Friday night because a couple of nights ago, and maybe people were drunk.
Many people
whatever.
don't remember their Friday nights.
Well,
That's
exactly. I do. McDavid didn't have a shot. Didn't have not obviously, but didn't have a point, didn't have a shot on goal. And that was the first time like Edmonton had won in forever without that happening. So I fully expect Connor McDavid to be, with a couple of days rest, even though the long travel, I fully expect Connor McDavid to be an absolute menace. And if he goes into Connor McJesus mode, it's over in a hurry for the Florida Panthers. Now, I don't think that's going to happen, but
so let's go there though. You've now. I was just reading as we were talking here and getting my ducks in a row. ESPN's big, they call it their mega preview.
Yep.
And in that, every single expert, there's 4 or 5 of their experts, all pick Edmonton.
Yeah.
You're giving them the Lee Corso pencil, not so fast, my friend. Why do you think Florida can reverse this trend? Because just to underscore, not just that Edmonton has won 3 games in a row. The aggregate score in those games is 18-5.
Yeah.
They have destroyed them.
So a couple of things. I think, first of all, that's a tad bit misleading. Game 4 was a blowout central, okay? Whatever. That happens. Game 6 the other night in Edmonton, Greg, was 2-0. A couple of minutes into the second period, Florida scores a goal 10 seconds later, and it gets whistled on a called back, reversed, on a really, really tight offsides. Entering the zone. I mean, it was a good call, and I think the NHL made the right call, but man, that game totally different if Edmonton loses that challenge or if the goal just stands and it's 2-1 as opposed to and 2-1 if Edmonton loses the challenge and then they've got to kill off a penalty, maybe Florida gets back to 2-2, who knows. So I think Game 6 was
and there was a couple empty netters at the end?
Yes, exactly. So I think Game 6 was a lot closer than the final score would indicate, and certainly the last 3 games and so on and so forth. Now, that being said, I mean, obviously, I understand the talent and the top sheer depth, if you will, of Edmonton, but I still lean in games like this, Game 7, where everything's a little tighter, game is called a little bit closer. Florida's at home. They are more desperate, even though Edmonton is desperate. They are more desperate than Edmonton. Now, maybe that can cause you to be tight, but I think they get back to what they have been about for a couple of years under Paul Maurice, which is Bobrovsky being great in the net. Good on defense, guys like Aaron Ekblad and company. Physical. I think they hit Edmonton early without being dirty. I think they're physical right from the get-go. And if somehow they can get a power play early in the game, get Edmonton in the box, and obviously score, that would be huge. But even just putting pressure, a lot of pressure, sustained pressure on Edmonton's penalty kill and on Skinner, I think that will loosen them up, get that crowd obviously even more jacked up, and I think then they start to settle into their game.
Clearly, the key to victory is get the Florida men and women drunk and get the crowd going.
That would help.
It's Florida.
It would also help if Carter Verhaeghe, who killed the Capitals a couple of years ago, for fans that remember that, and was great in the first 3 rounds of the playoffs, who's been really missing in action in this series. I think he's a -11, they said, through the last 4 games, and he's been been on the ice for a lot of those even-strength goals, and only has 1 assist in the series. Carter Verhaeghe has killed everybody in his playoff career. He is like the Devontae Smith-Pelly, or what Devontae Smith-Pelly was both before he got to the Caps in 2018 and what he became. That's what kind of impact player he is. If he gets an early marker, if he's flying around, if he's causing all sorts of problems, I think that catapults Florida just enough. Now, that being said, I mean, obviously if McDavid, again, just decides to go off, or if Leon Draisaitl wakes up, Florida's in a lot of trouble, but I just don't see that happening.
Chris Russell is with us, as if you didn't know by the voice. If you're just really, honestly, it's a reminder that I'm here. That Chris has not gone over, that there's not some weird schedule change. Chris is with us. We're talking hockey. Nothing's wrong. But there's Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final.
It's
tonight.
Good for everybody.
It's good. So actually, this is where I want to wrap up with you.
Yes.
Because you love talking hockey, but also you love to rant about the media.
I do.
What do you make of? Because I realized the hypocrisy in asking this question.
Yes.
I had you in to talk about hockey today.
Which I appreciate.
Anthony, when is the last time we talked hockey on this show?
The last time we talked hockey on this show was maybe never.
That's not true.
All right.
It was probably
Caps
when
Rangers?
it was probably when Sam Pell. It's definitely when Sam Pell was still working for the Post.
No,
and Sam was
you
on
had
the
to
show.
talk a little bit during the Caps Rangers series, didn't you?
Maybe we had Wino on.
Okay.
Maybe.
I mean, listen, I know it's
So,
not your thing. I get it.
It's not. And like my whole thing that I always tell people, unlike Stephen A today, was like, we're gonna actually no. Stephen A actually was like, I know nothing about hockey. So credit to him for once being honest. But I always tell people, why don't you talk more hockey? You don't want me to talk hockey. I don't know what I'm talking about. So I don't pretend, and I'm not going to try to do that.
I understand.
And from an audience standpoint, I'm not going to gain any audience, and the hockey people that are interested are going to go, you don't know what you're talking about.
Right. So I understand where you're coming from, but let me answer it this way. I am not
I
one
actually
of these
didn't even ask you a question yet, but go
sorry.
ahead.
I'm not one of
Answer the
these
question you know I was going to
hockey
ask.
snobs or purists that say, well, if you don't love hockey or if you don't know hockey, you can't talk hockey, because that would be kind of counter to what I'm trying to get, which is just simply an acknowledgement that the sport exists and that the Stanley Cup playoffs and final and the wonderful talent is great. Craig, I don't expect you to be an expert, just like you wouldn't expect me to be an expert in the NBA or the WNBA. That's more your territory, right? So to me, I'd rather have you, and this is me, I'd rather have you say, hey, listen, my knowledge is limited, but I'm really interested in blah, 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 blah. And this should be fun TV and this should be great drama and great theater. Even if it's limited in context or scope, I'd rather you have that than do what Mike Greenberg, for the most part, does every morning, what Stephen A. and Cold Pizza does every day, what a lot of sports talk radio does around the country is completely ignore it. So to me, I'd rather have a little bit of, hey, I'm not a hockey expert, but whatever, fill in the blanks, as opposed to complete, just total ignoring of the sport and whether it even exists or not.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And as someone who's been fighting for coverage
Correct.
and wants to see coverage of sports that aren't as popular,
Sure.
Especially across gender lines, but also just, soccer in general, but specifically women's soccer, the WNBA, of course. Like, I hear you. I will say the thing that I always try to do is exactly what you just said, actually, which is I don't want to yuck anybody's yum. Right, Sherry Burris always uses that phrase, and I think it's funny, but it's also brilliant. She's actually typically talking about food, but when it comes to like people's likes or dislikes, like if you like hockey, I'm not here to tell you that hockey actually sucks. It's just not like I only have so much time to watch sports, and I have other sports I enjoy more. Will I flip on tonight because I realize how awesome playoff hockey is? Yeah, and a Game 7 is the ultimate version, and God forbid this game goes to overtime. Like, I will be having a personal tension convention watching it, probably on my iPad, because my wife will not be as interested, and she'll want to watch the Olympic trials, which will be on the big TV. But am I going to throw this Game 7 on the iPad second screen tonight? Absolutely. Am I going to be interested in it and probably watch it, except for looking up 20 seconds at a time during the 200, whatever tonight? Then actually I think 200 later this week. But you get the point. Like, yeah, absolutely. So I think that's the thing that bothers me, not to go on a separate high horse here, but when people like to crap on specifically the WNBA, often it's motivated by things that have nothing to do with their taste in sports. And my thing that has been very, very weird the last 3-4 months that more people are interested is the weirdos who get on YouTube and in my comment section and go, who would possibly like women's basketball? And it's like, you care enough to go on the internet and leave a comment, but you claim not to care. And that says everything about you and actually nothing about me or the sport. And that's kind of the thing I'm interested in tonight to like keep a half an eye on with Twitter or the NHL. Is there a bunch of people being like, I get why I never watched this? Or are people actually like, wow, this is great? Because the theater of a Game 7 is unmatched, and hockey is as good of a format for that theater as I think any sport, even if it's not your favorite sport, which it is not mine.
That being said, I hope it's a really tight game. And yes, it would be unbelievable if it went into overtime, which we haven't had here a lot of. So I hope all of that happens because that will get casual and those West Coast viewers even more involved, which will help out the ratings and the numbers and the system and all that. Almost 10 million people across North America, now that includes Canada, they say watched Friday night's game, right? Now, again, we know TV ratings are not,
They're not scientific by scientist standards.
Yes, they are extremely small sample size. I've got my own issues, as you know. With that, I just
wait
hope...
till I tell you about radio ratings.
Oh, I know.
Don't get fired.
Trust me, I know. But I just hope the theater plays out, because this is hockey's big chance. Just like right now, I know you love the WNBA, but the WNBA's biggest and best opportunity to break through and become a sport that is in everybody's thought process is embracing and catapulting Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark. Whether that's, I know that's unfair to others. I know, but that's just the best chance you got. Well, for me, as a champion of hockey and somebody who is critical, like you said, of the mainstream media for ignoring it, tonight is my best chance. Please give me a big or thrilling game.
You want a hat trick secured by Connor McDavid on the game-winning goal in overtime.
Yes,
but like 7 minutes into it, because we don't need to be watching hockey till 1 a.m.
Some of us would be okay with that. The problem is as it gets later, even your boy gets tireder and
you get
more
tired?
More tired.
Nah, dude. Chris Russell is the Energizer Bunny. He just keeps on banging that drum no matter what time of day it is. Appreciate you sticking around
Thanks
for a little bit
having
extra.
Me. I appreciate you.
When we get back, there was a Commander story that seemed to slip under the radar of a lot of people today. Are they going to have to be looking for a new team president of business operations soon? We'll explain next on the Hoffman Show. We're streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Thanks again to Chris Russell for joining us, talking a little Game 7 tonight. That's awkward because Chris is still in the room. Thanks, Chris.
Bye, Craig.
Bye, Chris. We appreciate the Rooster sticking and staying with us. Coming up 1 hour from right now, Mystic Center Stephanie Dolson. They're coming off a pair of back-to-back wins over the weekend over Dallas. Steph had 18 points and 8 boards. She's shooting nearly 50% from 3 on the season. We'll talk to her about making buckets and grabbing boards and winning basketball games at 5:30. 5 o'clock today, Bobby Marks from ESPN, their front office insider, joins us. What moves could we see ahead of and around the NBA draft? And we'll also get his thoughts on what the Wizards should do with that second overall pick. But there's a Commander story today that might not have crossed your radar, and it's really stick a pin in it for later because it's something that didn't happen, not something that did. Jason Wright, the current team president of business operations for the Commanders, apparently was a finalist for the Green Bay Packers president and CEO job. This was reported by Jonathan Jones of CBS Sports, who's an excellent reporter, and Jones said that Wright was a finalist for this job, which would have made Jason Wright essentially the first person of color with his kind of, or I guess more specifically, the first black person with this kind of power in the NFL. Shad Khan, the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars, of course, is a person of color, and as is Kim Pagula, the wife of Terry Pagula, and they're co-owners of the Bills. But they're owners who are the majority owners of teams. But because the Packers are publicly traded, this would have been the first time that the highest ranking single person in any organization was a black individual. And so the history here would have been quite tremendous for Jason and for the league. But on a less historical, less grandiose, more functional level, Jason Wright nearly was a finalist and nearly left the Commanders, which a lot of you are going, well, good. I wish he got the job. I wish he was gone because you don't like Jason Wright, and that's fine. I'm not here to necessarily litigate that right now. What I am here to tell you, though, is if you read the writing on the wall, it would seem that Jason Wright is not going to be here much longer anyway. Jason Wright was hired in August of 2020. My guess is he had probably a 2, 3, or 4-year deal. And maybe if he had a 2-year deal, he probably signed another 2-year deal in 2022. If he had a 3-year deal, he probably signed an extension, like a 1-year extension in 2023 when Josh Harris got there and they're like, hey, we can't change everything right now. We'll talk again in a year. But my guess is, I can call it a slightly educated guess, is that Jason Wright's deal is up in August 2024. Meaning, if he was interviewing for the Green Bay Packers job, he would have already signed an extension, which would make that weird, or he doesn't have a contract, and maybe they're finalizing. Maybe they're working on it right now. Maybe he interviewed for the Packers just in case things fell apart. Maybe it was a leverage play. Maybe whatever. I'm not saying that 100% a month from now, Jason Wright is no longer going to be with the Commanders. But I would have thought, last time I heard anything, there wasn't anything done to extend the contract. That was months ago. And we are now a month before this came, or before his contract, I believe, is set to expire. And it comes out that he was interviewing and was a finalist somewhere else. So the idea that he would have just signed an extension and then be interviewing for the Packers job at the same time, I don't think makes a lot of sense. So it would seem, Anthony Haney, that Jason Wright's time in Washington, D.C. as president of the Washington Commanders, a year into Josh Harris's tenure, may be coming to an end. Did I miss anything? Is there a logic dot that's not connecting for you here?
No, I think
it sounds pretty logical.
Yeah, I think it tracks.
Yeah, so the question then becomes, like, then we get to the, like, is it actually a good move? Like, if Josh Harris is telling Jason, hey, like, go ahead, search, we're probably going to move on, is that a wise move? And I think Jason Wright working for Josh Harris, significant greater than sign Jason Wright working for Dan Snyder. Jason has executed very well on a lot of things that are really important to getting the Josh Harris era off the ground. And he deserves a lot of credit for those things. He also deserves blame for a lot of blunders that he did not help prevent or was responsible for during the Dan Snyder portion of his career. And I think some of those, Jason, in hindsight, probably looks at and was like, yep, I did not do a good job there, because that's the nature of life. You make mistakes. And when you're in a role as high profile as his, your mistakes are there for the world to see. And in some cases, like the Sean Taylor stuff, like people are just never going to forgive him for that. I do not put the name Commanders nor the absolutely botched rollout of said name on Jason. But there's a lot of people that will associate that with him forever. He ultimately did oversee it. Actually, that's not even fair. He ultimately was charged with executing it. Overseeing it goes to the Snyders. That was their idea. And that was a very Dan Snyder-driven move, which, again, goes back to a point that I've made 1,000 times, which is, why did the NFL not kick him out before they renamed the team? Oh, my God, you had a chance for a total franchise reset, you morons. What are you doing? Goodell. But anyway, he's gone, so that's nice. But I think over the last year, from being ready to welcome fans to training camp last year, like a lot of that stuff had to be prepared before Josh Harris owned the team. Like you don't buy the team on July 19th, and then the next day have stands ready at training camp. Like that stuff has been planned and worked through, and you're just anticipating the new boss saying, "Yep, it's cool that you put that on the credit card." So there's a lot of stuff like that in some of the things that they did last year to help rebuild the brand, rebuild the bridges with fans that I think Jason and his group on the business side did a really good job at. They were ready to go with sponsorship deals once the ownership change happened. That is something that clearly his office, if you will, his side of the building drove. There has been a lot of positive change on the culture, and Jason deserves some level of credit for that. And the people he's hired, the people he's empowered, and his own way of running a business, and his adaptability to work with Josh Harris. All that's fine and dandy. And by the way, I think the fact that he's been a DC guy, like in the DC world, like he was a McKinsey bro beforehand, the consulting company, right? Because he worked at McKinsey, like he's spent some time on Capitol Hill, and some of that has been really helpful to the stadium pursuit at RFK. But I think the question Josh Harris is asking now is not, is Jason Wright doing a good, okay, or even fantastic job? That's not really how Josh Harris operates. Josh Harris is a cold businessman when it comes to certain things. And as much as he has tried to be a little warmer, I think, in his ownership of the Commanders and community-based and really leaning into that because he realizes how important that is, when it comes to the business, his question is not, is Jason Wright doing a great job even? It's, could someone do a better job? Is this the literal best person for the job? And because of the continuity in year one, there's no question Jason Wright was the best person for that job, because you have to have some level of continuity. Like, you can't fix stuff if you don't know where it is. And I think a year is enough time to take inventory of what's going on, and then perhaps you can bring in your own person. And that I wonder if is happening. I think a lot of people anticipated Jason Wright would get at least a year, maybe longer. And I think the way things have gone, and the other thing is, as forward-facing as Jason has been, when they introduced the ownership group, like Jason emceed that event. That's not insignificant. And there's been a lot of other times that Jason has been trusted to be the forward-facing, like, voice and face of the organization, not necessarily from the ownership, but kind of representing the ownership. It's like, hey, this is our president. This is the guy that is out front. He's the highest-ranking person that's involved day to day, where ownership is going to check in on a more week-to-week or every couple of days basis. But ownership doesn't have a designed job in the way that Jason Wright has a designed job. And so I do wonder if this news about the Packers job that Jason Wright apparently almost got, by the way, there's a guy named Ed Policy, I believe is his name, which sounds like a fake name. It sounds like the fake president of the Green Bay Packers. Yeah, it's old Ed Policy. But that's who got the job. He was their in-house counsel and COO. So they go internal hire in 2025. Mark Murphy's got one more year left before he's going to retire. But it definitely sounds like, based off of this reporting, that this could be the final month for Jason Wright in Ashburn, or you're going to hear about a contract extension for Jason Wright, I would imagine, pretty soon. I think it's one or the other. You can't let this hang out there. People are good. Because the other thing is, if I'm talking about on the radio, there's no way that Nikki and Ben and John and the people on the beat are not digging on this.
Yeah, definitely an interesting time. I think. Well, I will ask you. Do you think this is one of those situations where, the Packers more so sought this guy out, or this was where Jason Wright actually, looked into, the Packers' vacancy there, and we're just looking for his next move, essentially, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, depending on when this all started, I think it could be either way. But in terms of career mobility, when you're the team president of the Washington Commanders, there isn't a lot of places up in the NFL to go. The Packers is the one job that's kind of up because of its unique nature, right? I guess Jason could add some football responsibility here if he wanted to, if that's something that interested him. I don't know that that's what he wants to actually do. I don't know if he's into, even from forget scouting, from a contract standpoint, because I do believe Mark Murphy has been involved in some of that stuff in Green Bay over the years. It would be great to talk to is Andrew Brandt, who used to hold a really senior position, if not this position, in the Packers front office. I don't think he was quite the president. I think he worked under Mark Murphy. But point is, the Packers job is unique because you don't work for an owner. And so you are the most powerful person in the organization. And thus, it is a promotion. It is a one-up to his current job, which is about as powerful as you get in an NFL organization. So I could see it either way. I could see him knowing this was open, reaching out through back channels and being like, hey, I'm interested. And them going okay, we're interested in you. You're a former player. You've got all this varied background. You seem like you could be up for this. Let's talk. And he made it through a lot. I'm sure there were multiple rounds of interviews, and he was a finalist. That's not nothing. That's impressive. But ultimately they decide to go in a different direction, and we'll see what that means. And I think we'll have our answer within the next 6 weeks of whether or not that was because Jason knew he had to find something, or because this was a unique opportunity that even, maybe he went to Josh Harris and was like, hey, the Packers reached out to me. This is a one-of-one opportunity. I love it here, but I'd like to pursue this because it's the Packers' job. And Josh Harris was like, I respect the hustle. Go for it, dude. But we'll see. I think we'll know our answer soon enough. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And when we get back, our weekend in review, including, speaking of media criticism that Chris Russell gave earlier, I got my own media criticism for our weekend in review in regards to one of our local teams here in D.C. That's next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Tomorrow, just before this time, we will have Kristen Peak from Yahoo Sports, who's one of the best NBA draft analysts out there. Kristen, tomorrow at 4:30. So make sure that you are tuned in for that. And if you are looking forward to the NBA draft and all the NBA transaction seasons, don't go anywhere because Bobby Marks joins us in 10 minutes, ESPN's NBA front office insider. So this weekend in review, which is brought to you by Anthony.
Nobody, Craig.
Yeah, still nobody. Weekend preview available for Friday. Send us an email. Weekend review. I want to start with not necessarily the Spirit game as we take a look at kind of all the other things that happened this weekend across the world of sports. We will do a WNBA weekend in review coming up about an hour from right now after we talk to Stephanie Dolson, including a wild game between the Fever and the Sky. Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese continues to just deliver insane basketball. We will get to that an hour from right now. But I want to actually talk about the Spirit game real quick, but not the Spirit game. So the NWSL made a smart decision to move this game, Anthony. They had initially moved this game into the 1:30 p.m. window because they were able to get a prime television spot from ESPN. This was going to be on ESPN, not ESPN2, like big ESPN, ahead of Sky Fever, by the way. So Monster Women's Sports Sunday on big ESPN, which you just love to see. Like, hey, if these leagues are going to partner with someone like an ESPN, like don't just shove them on ESPN Plus. And, you know, soccer fans of men's and women's soccer have been fighting this for years. It's like, oh, because we love the thing that we love, you think we'll just pay for it. And so all of a sudden, all of us are subscribed to Paramount Plus and Peacock and ESPN Plus, whatever. It's like, no, can we, every once in a while, can you throw us a bone, get the big audience? And by the way, when they do, like the audiences are great. The problem was this game was going to be played in Red Bull Arena in New Jersey at 1:30 on Sunday when it was going to be 98 degrees outside. And the league was like, this is not safe. We're not doing this. We're not going to make these women run around in 100-degree weather. Because the weather there was basically the same as here. And it hit 100 at Reagan Airport on Sunday. And so, yeah, it was like, that's asking for someone to get heat stroke, so we're not going to do that. And so they moved the game to 6 p.m. And ESPN is like, okay, well, we can't give you 6 o'clock on ESPN, but we'll give you 6 o'clock on ESPN2, which I think that's big of the NWSL to not put the players at risk from, like, physical illness and potentially really damaging heat to just be like, we got the TV audience. You don't want to watch someone get seriously hurt. So the problem is, my ultimate complaint is they could not have done a worse job of directing the audience of what actually happened. So first of all, I'm watching Fever Sky. They have a nice little promo up for like the entire fourth quarter, which is awesome to cross promote, that says Gotham Spirit, 6 p.m. ESPN2. So Fever Sky ends, and I go to ESPN2, and what's on? Softball. The AU Pro League, which, fine. There it's baseball/softball, a game with no time. There are just innings that have to expire. It runs long. Do they do a good job of telling you where to go? Not really. At some point, someone did. And I was able to figure out the games on ESPNU. So, did they say that on the W broadcast where a lot of the audience was going to flip from one to the other? Nope. Terrible job directing your audience. They go to ESPN2. Luckily, you're able to see whether it was the bottom line or the announcer mentioned it. Someone was like, it's on ESPNU. Or maybe I even saw it on Twitter. Game starting on ESPNU. I think I saw it on Twitter from the Spirit. Hey, the game's going to start on ESPNU. Okay, thanks. So you go to ESPNU. Okay, fine. Now we're watching the game. 30 minutes in, I hear the announcer say, we want to welcome those of you who are watching softball on ESPN2. Thankfully, they take the game on both channels from the hydration break at 30, because it was so hot they needed to have the mandatory hydration breaks that happens if it's above 90 degrees. And then they take that from when the new audience joins to halftime. At halftime on ESPNU, they just switched to softball. They like switched places. Did they say, hey, if you're watching on ESPNU, don't forget this game's now on ESPN2? Nope. It just literally half ends, go to commercial, softball. Please try. Networks, you want to be good media partners to these leagues. Please just try to be good to your audience, to us. And I would say this if they tossed around an NBA game, they tossed around, they would never do this to the NFL. That's for sure. And I understand these contracts are complicated, the way things work. These games get tossed around. Thankfully, they didn't just throw it up behind a paywall somewhere, because sometimes that happens to games where you're just like, oh, I thought this game was on X channel. Now it's on X.com. There was a game last week that one game ran into another, and the feed, I think it was on CBS. This happened actually with the WNBA to NWSL. And they're like, the game will start on NWSL.com. And the feed didn't work. So you literally just couldn't watch the game. And it was supposed to be on national TV. And you're like, CBS, what the hell are you doing? If you're going to be a media partner for any league, it's not that hard to get your actual broadcasters or to flash a graphic to be like, dear audience, boop, 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 air traffic control, this is where you watch the thing that's supposed to be on right now. It drove me nuts.
Not the life you deserve, man.
Not the life any of us deserve. That's the point. And it's so easy to fix.
Yeah.
But you want to know the good news, Anthony?
The Spirit won.
They did. They won 2-0, and Corey Bethune had another assist.
So glad I wasn't at the game.
It would have been a draw. I guess you could have stopped on the way back from Rhode Island.
Oh, I could have.
You could have. Croy now 9 assists on the year. She's also got 5 goals. She is one shy of the NWSL rookie assist record. Also, earlier this season, Trinity Rodman became the franchise's all-time leader in assists. Guess how many she has? Or she had at the time. I don't know if she's added to her total since.
42.
She had 16.
That's the franchise record?
So there's a chance, that Croy could be the franchise's all-time leader in assists by the end of the year.
How many more games do they have?
They're about halfway through their schedule.
Oh, man. It's a long season.
She's making the Olympic team, bro. I know she didn't make the last camp. I'm calling it. Croy Bethune is making the Olympic team. Because why would she not? Emma Hayes, I know you listen to... I don't think Emma Hayes listens to the show. But you should, and Croy Bethune should be on the Olympic team. Anyway, that's our weekend in review, brought to you by nobody. When we get back, ESPN's Bobby Marks on the NBA draft and all the trades that could happen before and right after it. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Mystic Center, Stephanie Dolson in half an hour. And Anthony, is it possible for you to do the honors to get our guest here rolling? Because it is 5 o'clock, and that means it is time for Not My Beat. Our top story today is that we are just a couple days away from the NBA draft, where the Washington Wizards are slated to pick second. And there's a lot that could happen between now and then, and nobody would rather talk about it with than ESPN's NBA front office insider, Bobby Marks, who joins us again here on the show. Bobby, great to chat. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure to have you, especially this time of year. There's so much that could happen between now and Wednesday. What to you is the thing that is most interesting, whether it's something like a Paul George extension or trade, or some of the extensions that could get signed, some of the trades that get made, something with the actual picks themselves? Is there something that you were kind of waiting for a shoe to drop before we even get to Wednesday night?
Yeah, it's like the buffet, right? What do I want to?
Right.
Do I want the salad first, or do I want to go somewhere else? Yeah, I think there's so many different storylines. I mean, certainly we can start with the draft. How wide open it is. Is it Zachary Ricochet at 1? Is it Donovan Clingan at 1? Who's going to fall? I won't say fall, but who's going to be picking? Who's going to be at number 2? Where the Wizards are here? I think that's the biggest thing, that we're not in a situation where it's Victor's a lock at 1, or even the year before when we had Ben Caro and Chet Holmgren and Jalen Green and Evan Mobley and that group of guys also. So I think how wide open this year's draft is, how little separation there is from some of the players in the top 4, top 5, how little separation there is probably for guys in the 20s, where the Wizards are with that later first round pick here. The ability to, if you're, Washington, do you move up at 26? Do you stay pat? Do you move out? So I think there's that way you can look at it. I think free agency, the ability that you can start negotiating with your own free agents after the finals started, which was last week, is an intriguing subplot, because, we're waiting to see what happens with Paul George, who controls a lot of things in free agency, whether the ability to extend with the Clippers, which has not happened, the ability to go out and become a free agent. Is there a trade in place here for him? So definitely a lot of different storylines. And then you mentioned the extension guys. I mean, this is an historic class of players that are extension eligible, whether it be Donovan Mitchell or Brandon Ingram or Jalen Brunson, Embiid, Durant, Curry. I mean, the list goes on and on as far as players that can sign long-term contracts.
So I think what's so interesting about that, Bobby, is I feel like in a lot of years, something happens during the playoffs where we go, oh, well, that team's now definitely changing something, or that changes the way that we see the league because a team wins a title doing something that you're like, oh, God, the rest of the league's got to react to that. Am I wrong that it doesn't feel like that happened this year? Not that there's not going to be stuff that happens. Obviously, we have eyes on teams like Phoenix. You mentioned the Durant extension potential. But, it doesn't feel like there was maybe that seismic shift this year where we're waiting for a bunch of bombs to go off, even if we know you just laid out all the bombs that could go off.
No, I mean, I think Minnesota loses in the conference finals. Am I expecting them to trade Karl Anthony Towns? No. I mean, Denver loses in the second round. I think that roster comes back in whole. Does New Orleans with Brandon Ingram maybe get to a point where they can't work out an extension and go in a different direction? Possibly. I think the same with Cleveland with Donovan Mitchell. I think the likelihood is that he probably does extend long term. But you're right. I mean, there's usually the playoffs kind of, it makes a team think about, wait, we got to change the parts to our roster. Maybe there's a player that gets unhappy. I guess Chicago might be the closest to that, a team that lost in the play-in. We saw it last week with the Josh Giddey, Alex Caruso trade. Zach LaVine we'll hear about his name again. DeMar DeRozan's a free agent, Patrick Williams, guys like that. So I don't see a team, trying to kind of shake up what they have. Boston's the gold standard, but trying to build your roster like Boston in this economic age of this new CBA and spending and restrictions here. I think if you're trying to mirror what they're doing, I think you're going to get yourself in trouble.
Which, by the way, is kind of how we saw the last mini dynasty in the NBA was the CBA change and the way the Warriors lucked into things with Steph's extension and obviously the cap boom, and they're able to sign KD and a million things happen. So the Celtics sitting pretty, but they also know how hard it is to win because they just won their first, not their third, despite how good they've been. If you look at the Wizards side of this, though, Bobby, they have the second pick. They have that later first, which they could go any direction with. But they also have some cap space and a couple of players that I think if I was a contender, I'd be interested in. Do the Wizards have a chance to be, now obviously not a player in terms of like, wow, they could make 3 moves and be a contender next year, but a crucial pivot point maybe for other teams to acquire things they want in the short term that could set up the Wizards better in the long term?
Yeah, Tim Bontemps and I wrote an article kind of laying out all these apron restrictions on these high-spending teams and the decisions they have to face. And we put Washington in kind of like laying in the weeds, like they're in a position where they've got a bunch of high trade exceptions. We'll see what happens with Tyus Jones, who's a free agent, but they're in a position salary-wise where if a team wants to, for example, trade a Mitchell Robinson and absorb it into salary, or maybe swap out a player, they can go about doing that here. So I think there's a couple different directions where you're looking. I think certainly the draft is important, where they're at 2 and 26, and then they got to pick in the early 50s. I think they'll get a really good player at number 2. I think if they stay at 26, they can get a good player at 26 too. Koulibaly, another year of development for him. You've got some stability at head coach. I think with Michael Winger and Will Dawkins, they have a better understanding as far as where this roster is, kind of who fits and maybe who doesn't. So there's a lot of flexibility where they can go in this off season here. Are they 1 or 2 moves away from competing for a play-in? Probably not. But I do think there's a kind of a foundation in place here that started last offseason with the draft.
Bobby Marks, ESPN NBA front office insider, with us here on the Hoffman Show. One thing that I found very interesting, Bobby, in reading mock drafts and other articles about the Wizards is people mention Tyus, of course, he's a free agent, and Jordan Poole is just kind of this forgotten guy, and he quietly had an excellent final 6 weeks of the season. Mm-hmm. It's like everyone got their memes and their jokes off because, my God, it was awful and meme-worthy the first 3, 4, and 5 months of the season. But if you were in Will or Michael's shoes and you're in that front office and you're planning for 2024 and beyond, how does Jordan Poole fit into your plan, seeing how strongly he finished the year, especially once he got into the more familiar point guard role?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the big decision. It came out when Tyus was out with the back injury, where Jordan played probably his best basketball of the season, as you mentioned, kind of in the last 6 weeks of the year. Now you have to figure out, is that sustainable? If the price tag to keep Tyus, it becomes too high, are you comfortable going in that direction for a full season? It's not just the last 6 months, of the season here. So I do think there was, we went from, basically probably one of the most toxic contracts in the NBA. And now, now you get a comfort level. When a player gets traded, we always think all of a sudden the player is going to play like he did in Golden State or even the year before when they won a championship. And when you have a coaching change, I think that, certainly changes the dynamics of things here. So that's an interesting decision because, I think Tyus Jones has a lot of value for the Wizards, I think from a veteran standpoint. But what's the cost to keep him? Is it $18 million? Is it $19 million? That's going to be the one thing to kind of follow.
All right, Bobby, I'm going to name 3 guys. I'll go one at a time here that are currently Wizards. I want you to tell me your best understanding of what is their value across the league. Like, what could the Wizards get in return, and what kind of teams might be looking at them? The first guy is Kyle Kuzma.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he's got value, kind of, what we saw last year with when P.J. Washington got traded at the deadline here. So are you looking to try to get 2? Can you get 2 ones for him? I mean, you're probably looking at kind of some type of pick trade here. I think his salary, his contract's manageable. It's declines. I think it's a little bit of a challenge with bonuses that are coming back here. So I do think at the minimum, I think he's got a first round grade to him.
All right, so that's probably the biggest fish that people would expect, especially considering the age and the experience and everything. When you go down the roster, some of the younger guys, Denny Avdia, do you think he could be on the move, and what kind of return could the Wizards get for him?
I think he's got a terrific contract. He signed the rookie extension. I think it's a matter of kind of, what happens with Kuzma. You've got Koulibaly as far as kind of, your big wing. But as I said, when you're, a guy making $12 to $13 million, which is going to be below the average player salary. I'm is still young. I'm probably more. He's got value, but I'm probably more hesitant moving off him.
So I guess the answer would probably be similar on my final guy that I want to ask you about. But if I was a team like Golden State, I would be beating down the Wizards' door for Corey Kispert.
Yeah, I wouldn't move him.
Okay, so what's...
I would move Corey.
Talk to me about that.
Heavily invested in trying to extend Corey Kispert. That's my direction there. When you have a guy that you drafted, I know it was under a different regime with Tommy Shepard and everything. And who had a career season. It was probably your most consistent player last year based on everything that happened. I would be more looking to extend him than try to move off him.
Yeah, I would too. He's also like the rare Wizards draft pick of the last bunch of years under the old regime that you look at him and you're like, he's everything we want. Like the mental makeup, all the leadership, all of that stuff. He's a serious professional. I can't say enough good things. If they trade Corey Kispert, Bobby, my media day gets worse. He's been my best interview 2 years running, and that's really what I care about on this show. Last thing for you, Bobby, on the way out. Where do you think Paul George is by the end of the week? Is he still in L.A., or does something happen around the draft?
That's a great question. I think, listen, if he becomes a free agent, that means declining that $49 million player option, and I think you're certainly looking at the Clippers or probably Philadelphia. I think that's kind of your two landing spots. If he opts into his contract, that opens up the playing field for a lot of teams, whether it be Golden State or New York, to potentially get into the mix to come in a trade. I think the Clippers have basically drawn a line in the sand, with the Leonard contract extension, 3 for $150. Paul George is in the fourth year of a contract, would be 37 years old. It's hard to pay a guy $62 million when he's 37 years old. But on the other end, you don't want to lose him. So I would probably lean a little more towards the Clippers. I do think they'll eventually work things out, but certainly I don't think you can discount, Philadelphia with all that money they've got to spend.
It's a fun time of year, and it's more fun than it's ever been with some of these extensions being eligible to be signed now, which means Bobby Marks is busier than ever. Bobby, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it, and look forward to watching you and the team on ESPN all week long and Wednesday night with the draft.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
As Bobby Marks, everybody, ESPN NBA front office insider. When we get back, either Anthony and I we have a decision to make during the break. We're either going to react to some of what Bobby just said, or we're going to take a look at some of the Olympic trials and some of the DC athletes that shine. But I think Anthony, actually, let's make the call right now. I think we should talk about some of what Bobby just said, because I think there's a lot of interesting NBA news. So let's do that and save the Olympics for the 6 o'clock hour.
We have time for it, but all right.
We're going to make it work.
Okay.
We're going to make it work. There's more Olympics running tonight and swimming tonight. So we can always talk about that tomorrow, too. It'll still be interesting. That's kind of the beauty of the Olympics. We're looking forward to it all summer. The NBA draft is Wednesday. Urgency, kids. So we'll talk more about what Bobby had to say next. It's the Hoffman Show. We are on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We're streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980 as well. And we were just joined by ESPN's front office insider, Bobby Marks. Bobby was great today. Bobby's always great, but he was extra great today. He was in a great mood. I'll pull back the curtain a little bit, Anthony. I was a little nervous if we get a tired Bobby because he was on some media call from like 4 to 5, and that's tough sledding. But yeah. I think we were just better. I think we were a more enjoyable conversation. I mean, plus, who doesn't want to talk about the Wizards?
Who does?
Us.
Okay.
That's why people come to the show in part.
Hey, look, you ain't lying.
Because we are willing to go where others shall not dare and talk about the Washington Wizards. Of course, they have the second pick coming up in the NBA draft. Bobby's colleagues, Jonathan Gavoni and Jeremy Wu, have their latest mock draft up. They have Zachary Rissachet going to the Hawks at number 1, which leaves Alex Sarr as the second pick in the draft potentially for the Wizards. It certainly seems like there was Brian Windhorst was on his podcast over the weekend saying that Sarr apparently prefers DC to Atlanta. Of course, that prompted Atlanta to say, "Oh, we still might take him. We don't care. We might take him. You know, can you get the Wizards to trade up, call their bluff, whatever." So we're in official silly season, just 48 hours before the draft. But it seems like Rissachet is going to be the first pick, like Sarr is going to be the second pick, which I think then influences some of the other things we just talked about with Bobby. So I gave Bobby 3 names that if I was another team and I was ready to compete, I would call the Wizards about. I would call the Wizards about Denny Advia. I'd call the Wizards about Corey Kispert, and I'd call the Wizards about Kyle Kuzma. Kuzma's obviously got the winning experience. He won a ring with the Lakers back in the bubble with LeBron and company. He's played in big games. He's taken on a bigger role, and I think as much as he wants to stay in that bigger role, and for the right team, would he back off his role a little bit in terms of the ball out of his hands and play a really important piece? Or could he lead, for a truly elite team, could you convince him like, hey, you're going to finish games, but you're going to be our star second unit. You're still going to get a ton of shots. We're going to run a lot of offense through you, but you're going to come off the bench. I think Kuz is probably better than that, but on a title team, would he be willing to do it? I don't know, but I would want to find out. Obviously, Dallas was interested at the All-Star break. They chose to go the P.J. Washington route instead, with their trade with Washington being for Daniel Gafford. And there's some other teams that clearly have poked around. See what direction Detroit goes into. They seem to be always interested in bringing Kuz home. But I think with Avia and Kuzma especially, Sarr presents less of a logjam than if you draft Rissachet, right? Let's say all of a sudden Atlanta flips it up and they draft Sarr or they draft Donovan Clingan, and you have the choice of both Frenchmen at number 2. I would think the Wizards would take Sarr based off all the things that the draft nicks are saying, but I'd also remind folks that nobody knows anything. There were zero leaks about, we still don't know who the Wizards interviewed for their head coaching job outside of Brian Keefe. Think about that. Think about how crazy that is. Like, it's almost standard procedure to know who was up for jobs. They did a first round of interviews that included 4 names. Then these 2 were the finalists. We know in Cleveland, for instance, they just made their choice. They hired Kenny Atkinson over James Borrego. We know the Lakers hired J.J. Redick over James Borrego. Apologies to James Borrego. We know in Charlotte there was a couple of names, and they ultimately picked Charles Lee, the assistant from Boston. So there is the fact that there's no information out there about what the Wizards did, and they claim to have cast a wide net, tells you something about just how secretive they are. But if they go Sarr, then you don't have the logjam on the wing with Koulibaly, Avia, Kuzma that you already currently have, and only gets worse with those guys. Now, I do think Sarr needs to play the 4, not the 5 to start, so you do get a little logjammy, but he's a different kind. Like, he's a big. He's not handle the ball on the perimeter, high usage wing type. So I think that if you draft Alex Sarr, It certainly doesn't like prohibit a Kyle Kuzma trade. I think if you can get 2 1s for him, you got to do it. If you get a 1 and something else for him, I think you'd still probably do it. And I also think there's been rumors that the Wizards are, potential trade partners with the Knicks for Mitchell Robinson. A SAR pick doesn't prevent that at all. That actually gives you the bulk and size at the 5 that you need to pair with a guy like SAR, although I think you'd want a stretch 5 if you can get one. Like Brooke Lopez would be a great pairing for in an ideal world if you're trying to win right now. There ain't no way Brooke Lopez is coming here, even if he's on his way out in Milwaukee, potentially. But, yeah, that's kind of where my head's at after talking to Bobby about that stuff. But I also think that he's right that you're going to have to make someone blow you away for Kispert. You're going to have to make someone blow you away for Avia because the contracts are too good and those guys are too young to just be like, we don't know exactly when we're going to be good, so we're going to give up on them right now and just keep kicking the can down the road. You want to keep multiple options open, and those guys are good and I think can be good, continue to be good culture setters for what you want. And I also think the last thing I'll say real quick, Anthony, is it's jump season. As Will Dawkins calls it. We don't know how good Denny Avdia could be next year. In his first year with a real player development staff and system, took a pretty big jump. What does he do in year 2? I'm not going to back off my position that he's like a 4th best player on a championship team, but he could get there because right now he's like the 6th.
Who of those 3, though, would you be most sad? I guess you did say Kispert primarily because of interviews.
Yeah.
But like,
who else have I talked to that's done a Scottish accent with me and said Krieg? Oh, Corey Kispert. It's only Corey Kispert.
Like on the basketball court, though, like who would you most be sad to see go, kind of thing?
I think Avdia is the hardest one to let go of because there's still some small part of you that goes, what if he is the 3rd or 2nd best player on a title team? Like, what if he just comes into his own and all of a sudden he's a 22-point, 10 rebound on a good team guy? I think the chance is slim, but it's not 0, so it's hard. I think Kispert is also really difficult to give up on because if he's just him for the next 5 years, he slots in perfectly no matter who. Like, there's never not a place for a 6'5" guy who can shoot, make some moves off the bounce, good athlete, tries hard, does all the right things. Like, and is getting better as a defender as well. Like, not good team defender, understands everything, and has gotten better as an individual defender. It's not that Kuz is easy to get rid of because Kyle's a great dude. He works hard, all the things. There's so much to like about Kyle. But because of his age, he's almost 30, and his contract, he's a lot easier to say, unless we're good right now, he doesn't fit our timeline. So it's no disrespect to Kyle. I love Kyle on like a personal level in terms of what he's brought to the team and how great of a ambassador he's been for DC and like how much he cares about the community and how much he's, frankly, just on a pure basketball standpoint, how much he's invested in the Wizards in a time where he knows they're not good. He's like, this is a place that's allowing me to grow, and I cherish that. And I'm going to be a good, upstanding member of this organization. I really respect Kyle Kuzma and always will for that. But I think as a team, you have to make a business decision and go, he doesn't fit our timeline, and you probably make a different decision there. All right, when we get back, Stephanie Dolson, Mystic Center, joins us. They've won a bunch of games in the last week and a half. What's happened? What's changed? What have they figured out, despite the fact that they're some of their most talented players are still riding the bench with injuries? Steph joins us next on the Hoffman Show. It's Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We're streaming live on the Team 980, and it is our pleasure, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980, and it's our pleasure to bring in Stephanie Dolson, center for the Washington Mystics, coming off a pair of wins over the weekend. Steph 18-8 in the win over Dallas yesterday. Steph, how are you? Great to have you back on the show.
Hi, thanks. I'm good. How are you?
Doing well. It's a fun week. We got the NBA draft. Y'all are rolling over the weekend. A couple of fun games coming up this coming week for you as well. But these two games against the Wings, obviously big opportunities. You two, unfortunately, have had a bunch of injuries that have kind of wrecked both of your seasons. What was the team's mindset going into these games, knowing, obviously, you find out you're not going to have Aaliyah going into the weekend. Shakira and Brittany are still out, but knowing that there's a great opportunity to stack some wins in front of you going into this weekend?
Yeah, it was just kind of the next man up mentality. We know that we have one of the best benches in the league, although our record doesn't necessarily show it with all the injuries. But the bench, they've really stepped up a lot in the last few games, and especially this weekend with Aaliyah being out as well. So it was really just, we all knew we had to give it our all, and I think everyone can say that they did, because I think we're all pretty exhausted today.
Yeah, the good news is you don't play again until Thursday, so get some nice rest in. When we talked at Media Day before the season, we talked about how you are both here to lead, obviously, but you're also here to play and show what you can still do. You're shooting 46.7%, I think is the exact number, and nearly 50% from three on the season. How has that part of your game developed over the years, and what has been so good about both the looks you're getting and the comfort you're having hitting them this year?
Yeah, well, I think it's gotten better just from a lot of practice. I've pushed myself outside of my comfort zone from just doing kind of pick and pop threes to fill threes, spacing threes, transition threes, just so that I'm ready for any situation that I come across in the game. And I mean, I think as a team, the last couple games, we've done a really great job of just moving the ball. And when we move the ball, we get open shots. And thankfully, I think the chemistry has been building. So it's given a lot of people a lot of confidence so that we're knocking those shots in.
How does your mentality, your confidence, whatever word you want to insert here, change when it goes from like, I can hit those shots to I'm hunting those shots? That is why I'm here. Yeah.
I mean, I think for me especially, it's changed a lot just with the preparation that I've put into it. When I miss a shot now in a game, I used to just be like, would kind of go downhill. But I think recently in this season, especially, the confidence that I have, when I miss a shot, I almost know for a fact the next one's going to go in. So I think that has really changed for myself, but also for the team. I think everyone is feeling a little bit more confident that, hey, we miss a few shots, the next one's going in. It's not like a downward spiral or anything like that.
When you prepare for a season, Stephanie Dolson is our guest, Washington Mystics center here on the Hoffman Show. When you prepare for a season and you have someone like Brittany, who is supposed to be the centerpiece, not just because of her talent, but functionally speaking, she's going to be doing a lot of the ball handling. She's doing a lot of the decision making. And she goes out as early as she did. And obviously she comes back, she plays amazing, and then winds up getting hurt again in that game. What's the process and how difficult is it to kind of recalibrate and find how to play? And what were the conversations like between, especially you as a veteran and Eric and the coaching staff, as you guys tried to recalibrate and find how this offense specifically was going to run without Brittany Sykes at the center of it?
Well, I think initially it was extremely unfortunate. We had only gotten a game and a couple minutes with her. So I think it was a quick kind of turnaround and change of mentality of, okay, who's next? Who's the backup point guard? And, thankfully we have Julie, who has been a point guard. So she stepped in really well, and everyone just kind of filled around it. And it hasn't been easy. And like you said, when she came back, she played so well. She opened up a lot of other shots. I know for myself, especially coming here, I knew my skill set would really complement hers with her speed and athleticism. And I was able to kind of set really great screens for her and knock down shots. I kind of had to change my mentality, and I think everyone did, of having to just do a little bit more and maybe some stuff that we're not used to. But I think that's what we've all kind of gotten better at in the last few weeks without Slim. And I think that's where we're going to have to just keep going until she gets back.
I'm going to make you do this, Stephanie, as a
Uh-oh.
UConn alum. When
Uh-oh.
you see the player that Slim has become and you think back to watching her at Syracuse, did you think that this was possible?
Yes and no. I think anyone with her just body and athleticism has the ability to get as great as she has gotten. I think it just comes down to her work ethic, which I didn't know at the time. So, but looking at the way she played at Syracuse, it's not surprising to see how far she's come.
Yeah, as the Syracuse alum, I had to see make you compliment your teammate back when she wore orange, but then again, the rivalry's dead and it's our fault because we left, so you get the last laugh. Stephanie Dolson's with us here on the Hoffman Show. I think this season, obviously, on a more macro level, Steph, has obviously been very interesting to be around the WNBA, to be inside it, and to see. I mean, for the Mystics, they've been selling out ESA for a long time, but you have the games at Cap One that go so well, and I'm sure you're watching the league and seeing everything that's happening around. How have you experienced it, the good, the bad, the otherwise, as a player this year, watching what the league has become in terms of public discourse and the conversation? And again, there's good and bad to that, of course, acknowledging all of it. What's it been like to be inside of it?
Yeah, a little bit of a whirlwind for sure. I think it's exciting, especially when we've played those certain teams that have the most commotion around them. It's exciting, especially for, the younger guys and the rookies who, although Aaliyah, I know, played in front of many crowds,
Sure.
big crowds at UConn, to kind of feel that energy and that electricity that, each city can bring. The fact that so many people are talking about the WNBA is great. Obviously, like you said, some of it is not so great. That's being said, but at the same time, it's still pushing the conversation forward and getting the WNBA out there. And I think there's a really big rise in fame and just publicity and everyone just seeing the girls and the women that play in the WNBA and how great we can be. So I think it's exciting. Sometimes a little stressful maybe when
Sure.
you're in it. But it's still just fun. We get to play against amazing women every day and compete at the highest level. And I think it's no less than a great thing that everyone gets to see that.
For sure. And I think, being around the league and also, the time I spent with the Washington Spirit and knowing so many of the athletes over there are some mornings that y'all wake up and you're like, yes, this is the best. I get to inspire young women and girls and inspire young boys who want to play the sport. I get to be this inspirational figure and kind of embracing that place that women's sports holds in society. And there's other days that you wake up and you just want to play and you just want to be a player and you don't want to have to deal with the rest of that. Have you felt the balance of that change at all with the extra attention this year?
I think so. I think for me, I try to stay out of it. I'm a very much I genuinely play basketball just because I love the sport and I love to compete. So I think for me personally, I do a pretty good job of staying level-headed and kind of compartmentalizing where I'm at in the situation and what's going on outside of it. So I think, but I'm sure, someone like Aaliyah has a lot going on, and that's why as one of the vets on the team, I try not to overwhelm her with basketball information because I know, there's a lot of outside stuff I'm sure that she's dealing with and has to see and hear. So I think it's just a mentality of when you have a game, you focus on that game, and when you have press or fans coming out, then you get to enjoy that too.
Two more questions for Stephanie Dolson on the way out here, center for the Washington Mystics, with us here on the Hoffman Show. Speaking of Aaliyah, you were obviously familiar with her if you didn't already have a relationship, as you both do bleed blue. But how impressive has it been to see her day to day and what she's been able to accomplish as a rookie and the way she's kind of conducted herself as she's been so productive on the court?
Well, I think we knew when we drafted her that she would be a quick pro. I know Gino, the way he kind of coaches and helps the girls mature in college it just makes a really good pro. And she came in and acted just like that. I mean, she's the last one in the gym. She's always working, doing extra work, taking care of herself, just is very mature in the way that she approaches the game and approaches the team. So I'm very happy that she's here. When she got drafted, I texted Gino and I said, we got a good one, and how excited I was for her to be on the team. So I'm just extremely happy and grateful she's here and that she's been doing so well. It's unfortunate the last couple games that, she's been out, but I know she'll come back doing exactly the same stuff she was before.
There, we got to tell her, hey, you're too young to have low back problems, Aaliyah. That's not
Yeah,
allowed.
right. That's what I said. Yeah, I'm 32. I'm supposed to be the one with them.
Yeah, it's just not allowed until that first digit on your age is at least a 3. Sorry, these are the rules, Aaliyah. Got to get back out there. I didn't write them. I'm just here to express them. All right, last but not least, Steph, I don't know if you're aware, but it is brunch and basketball this weekend. Your game against the Aces. So I have to, again, I'm legally required to ask you this question: are you a brunch girly?
I am a brunch girly, although I am usually a breakfast, brunch, and then lunch girly because I can't just wait till like 11 or 12 to have brunch. I have to eat breakfast first.
No, I'm with you. Like, hey, we're going to do, DC is a very brunch town. It's like, we're going to do one brunch at 1 o'clock. Oh, you mean lunch that I'm just going to have a breakfast meal at? Cool. I'm going to have breakfast in the morning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm just going to have 2 breakfasts. That's fine.
Right.
If that's brunch, then count me in.
100%. Favorite brunch? Are you like a chicken and waffles? Or are you there for the mimosas? What's your favorite part of brunch?
Well, definitely there for the mimosas, but probably I'm more of like an Eggs Benedict girl.
Okay.
I love an Eggs Benny.
It's a great call and a classic of the genre, if you will.
Yes.
Steph, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Best of luck this weekend, and hopefully the win streak can keep on rolling.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Of course, our pleasure. That is Stephanie Dolson, everybody, with us here on the Hoffman Show, Center for your Washington Mystics. And don't forget, the Mystics, every time they're on Monumental Sports Network, which is basically every game for the rest of the season. There's a couple national TV games sprinkled in there as well. But anytime they're on Monumental Sports Network, they are also right here on the Team 980. Megan McPeak and Christy Winters-Scott simulcast here on the radio. When we get back, the rest of the weekend in the WNBA, including another instant classic between Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark's squads. That's next after we tell you what's trending. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980 as well. Thanks again to Stephanie Dolson for joining us. Great to chat with Steph about the Mystics' recent success, including the pair of wins over the weekend against the Dallas Wings, which have vaulted them, Anthony. I swear to God, this is true. This is the wackadoodle nature of the W because it's a small league and it's highly competitive. They're 3 games out of a playoff spot.
Yes.
But also, I got to pull up the standings again. They're like
2 games out of last place.
Yeah. That's just the nature of the league. Expansion is coming.
Yep.
But in the meantime, that is the nature of things. The team that is currently in the 8th and final playoff spot is the Chicago Sky, who have won 2 in a row, including an absolutely bonkers game yesterday against Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever, which I'm curious to see what the number is from a viewership standpoint. The last game they played last week against the Fever, where they lost at Indiana, this was a win thanks to a huge comeback at home. That was 2.2 million on CBS. I'm expecting like 1.6 or something like that probably on ESPN. You're not going to get quite the audience as if you were on, ABC, for instance, because this was an ESPN game. But I still expect over 1 million people to have watched this one as Reese and Clark do battle again. And through 3 quarters, Anthony, there was no doubt who the better team was, who the better of those 2 were, although they're not actually matching up head-to-head. Because Clark had 17 points and 13 assists through 3 quarters. She was outstanding, totally dominating the game. The way that she was able to control the game with the pass, control the game with her 3-point shooting. She was 5 of 9 ultimately. She was 5 of 8 through the first 3 quarters. And then she finished with those exact same numbers. And the inability of Indiana to close this game, where they just needed anything in the fourth quarter, a fourth quarter where they scored 15 points, outscored 24-15, and Reese just kept getting it. 25 points, 16 rebounds for Reese, and I think like 6 or 7 of those rebounds came in the fourth quarter. And she just kept putting her head down, kept getting layups, got to the free throw line, knocked down a free throw. She's 9 of 11 there, and like, damn, man, it is impressive. Kennedy Carter's having a monster season. She had 23 in this game and 5 assists as well. Cardoso has a monster rebounding night. She's got 10 in 28 minutes, 16 points as well. Every time I watch Indiana, I get so frustrated at how bad they are at executing. But you also have to give a ton of credit to specifically Angel Reese. I'm not just saying that because she's the name everybody knows, but she's the engine of that Chicago team, and she had it revved all the way up with that crowd, egging them on in Chicago, and they went and kind of punched Indiana in the mouth and stole that game. And Indiana could have prevented it by, moving, ducking, weaving, having a plan other than continuing to get hit in the face. But ultimately, you have to credit the puncher too.
Yeah, I think you said it right, man. They stole that game. The Fever were up 15, and I want to say they went up 15 after Caitlin Clark made like a deep 3. I think it was her 5th 3 of the game, and then like she made a face, and ever since
she hit him with the shrug. She hit him with the shrug. She was 5 of 8 from 3. She had 13 assists. They were barely, they weren't even through the third quarter, and she hit him with the shrug, and from then on, it was like lights out. I'm trying to calculate I don't know if I'll be able to do the math quickly enough. But like they went on like a 17-3 run or something like that.
Yeah,
did Indiana to close the third?
They Indiana. Oh, you said Indiana or Chicago?
Indiana to close the or not to close the third. Earlier.
Yeah, it was a run they went on, and then the Sky responded with a 7-0 run to close the third, and then from there, the fourth quarter. They just kept piling on.
24-15 in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And the Fever's lead was big enough that the Sky, it's not like the Sky took the lead and then it was back and forth. No, like the Sky took the lead in the final seconds. And by the way, let's not get it twisted. These two teams are not polished basketball teams. These are not great basketball teams, as evident by the final seconds when Chicago missed a bunch of free throws and couldn't execute, and Indiana had a shot. And they kind of they messed up some of the execution because they're not a good team. And, Aaliyah Boston gets I got to give Clark credit. Clark, instead of trying to play hero ball, makes the right read. And Aaliyah Boston's who had a very good game and is really straightened things out after a rough start to the season. Aaliyah Boston's been sensational for about 2-3 weeks now. But she had an 18-footer straight away and just bricked it. I don't know whether she rushed it. It was not the kind of miss you expect from a player of Aaliyah Boston's caliber. Just straight up missed it off the backboard left. And Clark made the right move. And, I saw this thing on Twitter earlier today that was Caitlin Clark leads the league in turnovers. And it was a play where Clark just throws this beautiful get-ahead pass, and her teammate just doesn't catch it. And there is some of that. And Clark now is the only player in WNBA history to accumulate 100 turnovers in 20 games. And she did it in 18. So we're talking about clearly some of her own fault, but it is a team that continues to be discombobulated for far too much if they want to be serious about being a playoff contender. And now, due to this win, Chicago takes over their spot in the WNBA standings. Chicago now 6-9, 7.5 games behind the Liberty, who have passed the Connecticut Sun, who also lost back-to-back games over the weekend. So the Liberty now in first place, Chicago in the 8th and final playoff spot, a half game ahead of Indiana. As we said, the Mystics are 3 games behind Chicago. And actually, Anthony, they are just, thanks to their back-to-back wins over Dallas, they're a half game ahead of Dallas for the final playoffs, or not the final playoff spot, the bottom of the standings, thanks to the fact that the Dallas Wings have lost 11 straight basketball games, despite Arike Agumbawale being sick throughout the entire season.
Yeah, that's injuries, they'll get to you. But did you see what Caitlin Clark said after the game?
I did see what she said after the game. I think we have that sound, actually.
Yes, we do.
Do you want to hit it, or you want me to hit it?
I got it.
Fire away.
I'm pretty sure the only people that view this as a rivalry is all of you. For us, it's just a game of basketball. That's what it is, and if it's going to help move the game forward, absolutely. That's amazing. That's what it should be. People could talk about it. I think it's, I saw the ticket prices. I guess the only thing is, I'm surprised we're not playing at the United Center. I thought that would have been really good for the game and really good for all the women's basketball fans in Chicago. So maybe there's a conflict of some sort that I don't know about. Obviously, that's a little above my pay grade. But we're excited. One game at a time. You kind of got to wipe this and learn from it. And we travel tonight and get there and practice, and it's a prep, and then you're playing the next day at 4 p.m.
The interesting part there is the first part.
Yes.
When she tries to tell us that this isn't a rivalry. I think Caitlin probably feels that to be true in her heart more than anybody else on that floor, because Caitlin, for 2 years in college and now in the pros, has been getting everyone's best shot, right? That's the nature of being in college for her, the best player, and the draw. You think of, when Ohio State beat them. Ohio State at the time might have even been ranked higher. They rushed the floor in Columbus when they beat Iowa. But then you get in the W and you got all these vets that are it's not jealousy, but it's okay, Rook. It's just sports, right? It's oh, okay, we got some eyes. Y'all gonna learn today. There is no way that is true for anyone else on the court. And I don't think it's true for Caitlin either, if I'm being totally honest. She can tell us, and she's saying the right thing. She's trying to downplay it. It's not a rivalry. Watch the game. Those two teams don't like each other.
At all.
And that's fine. I don't think that they disrespect each other. I don't think that, even despite some of the stuff that's happened, I actually don't think that there's anything other than a healthy sporting amount of disrespect. There's not anything personal on like a problematic level between the Chicago Sky and the Indiana Fever. But I think part of the way Chicago functions is like Angel sees herself as an underdog. I think Teaspoon is their coach, Teresa Witherspoon. Like, she's got some of that to her. Someone like a Kennedy Carter has that to her. She's, was a former top 5 pick, has had her struggles, and is having a hell of a year. Like, Kennedy Carter is probably your front runner for most improved player in the W. Like, she's been awesome this year. And most people, unfortunately, know her name because she took that cheap-ish shot on not cheap-ish. She took a cheap shot on Clark in the first matchup. But between that kind of chip on your shoulder nature, all the attention for Indiana, they're battling for a playoff spot, the Reese-Clark rivalry, the Iowa-LSU, it's a rivalry. And if the W doesn't, unlike the Olympics where we don't give spots away for marketing, if the W doesn't lean into this and put these games, the Fever already play at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, put the game at the United Center, make sure it's on national TV, you're fumbling the bag so hard. In the same way that, like, if Steph and LeBron, when they play, aren't on national TV, the NBA is fumbling the bag. It's just, when Brady and Manning played, they didn't play at 1 o'clock as the 4th game on CBS. That's not how that ever went down. So that's just got to be, it is a thing. And as much as Clark and Reese and others want to deny it, it's clearly a rivalry. When we get back, speaking of rivalries, speaking of the NFC East, I didn't mention the NFC East. Cowboys, Commanders. It's typically not at 1 o'clock on a Sunday. No. They play at 4:25. How do their secondaries compare? How do their D-lines compare? Logan and I went through the exercise. We did our positional group rankings for offense last week, defense this week. Let you hear the D-line next and why doing the defensive positional groups was so much harder than the offense. Take command for you on a Monday, next on The Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. We are done at 6:45 tonight as we have Game 3 of the College World Series. The final title will be decided here on the Team 980. But before that, a journey into Take Command land where Logan Paulson and I continued our favorite offseason project, which is to rank the positional groups in the NFC East. It was very hard on the defensive side for reasons that will become obvious in a moment. You also hear our defensive line rankings in this Monday edition of Take Command on the Hoffman Show.
It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulson and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? Welcome in. It is the Take Command podcast. I'm Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulson. And today we are talking defense, our second of two positional rankings podcasts where we take the NFC East. We divide every team up into their position groups and then we rank them. The offense, if you missed it, was last week. It was great fun. It's a podcast. You can listen to it anytime, anywhere. That's the beauty of a podcast. Just like this one. You can do the same thing. So, Logan, when we look at the defenses in the NFC East, before we even get to the players, though, every single team in the division has a new defensive coordinator. So this is a bit of a guessing game for us because we don't know exactly how everyone's going to be deployed, not just here in Washington, where we've talked about that quite a bit throughout the spring, but literally every player on every team throughout the entire division is a bit of a mystery because they're getting coached and utilized by a new coach.
Yeah, and I think that's something, when I was doing my prep for this, I was kind of like, man, I could honestly see, let's just take defensive backs for rank. And I think if you look at last year, just as an example, Deron Bland, Stephon Diggs, Stephon Diggs, is that correct?
Trayvon Diggs.
Trayvon Diggs, yeah. They on paper are probably the best group, but they were also probably the best coached, and now that coaching staff is here in Washington, I could see there being some type of a flip because Zimmer, is a guy that on third down specifically gets really aggressive in man-to-man situations. Guys lose leverages, guys take chances, and, a group in Dallas that was characterized on taking chances and making explosive plays, all of a sudden, are they going to be allowed to do the same stuff they were prior? And I don't know is the answer. And so it's always really interesting to me how, it's something that I probably was a little bit of an oversight, early in my career as an analyst is just how important the scheme is and how important the coaching is. Because I really think Vic Fangio in Philly is one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL. And, obviously that group's really talented. They underperformed last year, but a good coach can help maximize that group. And guys that look like they were maybe over the hill a little bit, Darius Slay slowing down, all of a sudden it's different because they're able to disguise stuff differently. They're able to get in different coverage structures, speak to skill sets differently. So I think, kind of dissimilar to the offensive rankings, this is going to be one that I think is, I'm going to put a big asterisk next to everything I'm going to say, because for me, it's kind of remains to be seen. You know what I'm saying? We can kind of evaluate the talent on the roster and say these guys are good football players, but ultimately, I think about Dexter Lawrence, just as another example in New York. One of the reasons he was so good is because Wink was able to do such a great job of getting him one-on-one with the center. And obviously Dexter's a great player, but his utilization is going to be completely different this year. So I'm, again, going through these rankings, going through the players, we can talk about them specifically more in a minute, but I cannot overstate how important the defensive landscape and how different it's going to be this year because of the new defensive coaches.
No doubt. And just as a reminder, so you got Vic Fangio in Philly, obviously Joe Witt Jr. Here in D.C., Shane Bowen, who was in Tennessee the last couple of years. He is the guy in New York now. And then who am I missing? I said Philly. I said, Dallas has got Mike Zimmer. So that is what we got now. And we'll see how these, defenses get put together because there are a ton of really, really great defensive players in this division on all three levels. So let's get into it. Let's start off with the defensive lines, which might be the strongest group in this entire division. You got all pro caliber players on literally every single one. Of course, in Dallas, you got DeMarcus Lawrence, Micah Parsons highlighting their group. Maybe some questions inside that we can get to. The Giants have Dexter Lawrence. They make the trade for Brian Burns this offseason. If we're going to count him, as kind of a 3, if they go 3-4. Do we count Burns as and Thibodeau? I would as their pass rush unit. So you got those studs on the outside, especially when Thibodeau plays Washington. It's the Daniel Jones, but on defense. Obviously, we know what we have in Washington. The 2 Pro Bowlers inside and a bunch of questions on the outside, but solid players that are brought in. And then Philly's got, the trade for Bryce Huff. Josh Sweat's still around, but they lose Fletcher Cox. He retires. What are Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis as they continue to evolve? So talent all over the place, Logan. Any particular unit that you think stands out as the clear number 1?
Yeah, I came into this kind of saying, it's going to be Philly all the way. But after kind of reviewing the depth charts and watching a little bit of film, I'm probably going to go with New York Giants here. I know that might be a little bit of a surprise, but like Brian Burns is a 10-plus sack guy. Kayvon Thibodeau's a 10-plus sack guy. And they've done it. They've proved they can do it. I think Dexter Lawrence also is a 10-plus sack guy. So having 3 guys at 3 different positions on that front that are very productive pass rushers. Dexter Lawrence was, for probably a 9-week period, the best defensive player in the NFL. And then obviously teams get wise. They start scheming him up. But he was more dominant last year for that 9-game stretch than Micah Parsons, Aaron Donald. Name your defensive player, he was the guy, and he still brings that level of talent each and every week. And we talked about how, with Shane Bowen's defense, that's going to be a little bit different, and is the utilization going to be the same? But then I look at Jordan Phillips too, who's again one of the best kind of larger interior run-stuffing players who also has a little bit of pass rush upside. You look at Azeez Ojulari, who's the backup to Kayvon Thibodeau. He had a 10-sack season, I want to say 3 years ago. He's been injured a little bit up and down there, but I think in terms of juice, in terms of production, you look at the backups. You look at Raheem Nunez-Roches. He's played a lot of football. He was a starter in Tampa Bay 3 years ago. Jordan Riley's maybe one of the biggest human beings in the NFL. He's 6'5", he's 340, and is a big run-stopping player. Like, they just are – the top end's really good, and then the depth rotational pieces are also really good. And I think the difference between this group and Philly, at least in my estimation, is they've done it. I think everyone talks about Philly and Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter. And again, I think those guys don't get it twisted. I think they're tremendously talented football players. They just haven't strung a whole season together the way those other guys have. And I think that can't be overstated. Like, I could think you're the most talented guy. Like, Jalen Carter was, my number 1 player in the draft whenever he came out. Like, he's an excellent football player. But he still hasn't kind of put it all together. We've seen flashes, and this year, him and Jordan Davis, the defensive coordinator Fangio, basically, I read an article getting ready for the show, basically saying if he's in shape, Jordan Davis, he's the best defensive player in the NFL. But is he going to be in shape? Is Jalen Carter going to be ready to go? Like, there's all these ifs with that group, and again, they're uber talented. I just think the consistency of the New York personnel, I'm going to lean that way, I think.
Well, it's something that for years we've kind of said they can take that kind of stuff in that room because they have Fletcher Cox, they have Brandon Graham. Cox retires, Graham's still around, but is the dynamic of that defensive line room different in Philly, where all of a sudden you're not getting the best out of Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis because the standard has dropped because Fletcher Cox isn't there? Like, that's a TBD question. Leadership in general in that locker room with Jason Kelsey retiring. And the year they had last year, kind of in the way they finished, you have to think upends everything.
Right.
So what does it look like? We'll ultimately see. But from a talent standpoint, talk about those two. Their teammate at Georgia, Nolan Smith, who ran 4.39 at the combine a couple years ago, and had some flashes last year. They bring in Devin White. Like, they've got some guys behind them that they can make look really good, as we'll talk about with the linebackers as well. In terms of stopping the run. But as pass rushers, Bryce Huff, he's got pop. Sweat's got pop. Mm-hmm. So I think that Philly group still probably would get the slight lean from me. But I don't know. That's also probably I also just like look at New York and I'm like, oh, the Giants stink. And I have to stop doing that because the reality is, like, Thibodeau, if he can be more consistent, that's the thing. We say he's done it. He's been really inconsistent, But
Sure.
inconsistent that ends at 10 sacks means that there's some really high highs in there as well.
Yeah.
Lawrence is consistent. Burns is consistent.
Yeah.
And what does he do with more talent around him? Although he did play on a pretty good defensive line in Carolina, actually. I definitely think those are the top two. And I would even say I would put Dallas kind of in that group because Parsons is so dominant. And DeMarcus Lawrence is still good, even if he's on the back end. I tend to think that those three are kind of battling for one. And as talented as Washington's line is, and they might be the best coach potentially, with what we've seen from DQ over the years and what he does with defensive lines, I think Washington probably winds up coming in fourth here.
Yeah, and just to kind of double click on Philly, I think you get Bryce Huff in there, who is one of maybe the player I'm most excited to see kind of in the NFL, like in terms of an expanded role. He had the highest pass rush win percentage last year. He, higher than name your edge player. Name your Myles Garrett's, your Nick Bosa's. Like his pass rush win rate was higher, but he's operating in such a small window. So you basically move on from Hassan Reddick, sign Bryce Huff, and does Bryce Huff with this larger role be productive? And I think that's the thing with Philly that I'm a little on the fence about is like, are they good football players? 100%. Are they uber talented? 100%. But like they haven't done it in their new roles. You know what I mean? They haven't been the guy yet. And I always kind of have to defer to like Dexter Lawrence has done it, and as much as I think Jordan Davis can be that guy, be that caliber of player, and Jalen Carter can be that caliber of player, like they just haven't done it with the consistency he's done it yet. And, Burns, we talked about, he, again, has played more football. He's been on the field more. He's done it kind of in this starting caliber role in Carolina. And Bryce Huff, while I think has a higher upside, hasn't done it yet. So I think that's kind of what I'm kind of banking on there. And Kayvon Thibodeau, like you said, is he better than Josh Sweat? I don't know. Josh Sweat's a pretty good player in my opinion. So it's really kind of like 6 in one, half dozen in the other. And I think the other thing that needs to be alluded to is I think Vic Fangio is a better, at least on paper, at least in my experience. And again, I don't want to maybe besmirch Shane Bowen like this because I think that defense in Tennessee was amazing. Yeah, it's just I think Vic Fangio's
for sure.
I think Vic Fangio's special. I think he's just a special talent as a coach.
He's the godfather of like what I would consider the modern NFL defense. Like I don't know. I mean, it's not like Kyle's too young for him to say, or for us to say like Vic Fangio is the Kyle of the defensive side of the football. But if you look at the dominant scheme around the NFL and like who's the guy whose tree all the people come off of, Vic Fangio is the guy. Like there's probably more people running Vic Fangio defenses. It's not quite as proliferated around the league as maybe versions of Kyle's West Coast, but it's probably the heaviest usage defense. And certainly some of the principles of some of the man matching and different things that he's done that he really created along with his staffs in Chicago, in Denver over the years. So yeah, I mean he's different. There's a reason that he kept getting brought into Philly, to Miami, to these places over the past couple of years as a consultant, to be like, please, for the love of God, help our defense. And also, I think guys like Mike McDaniel wanted to learn from him to understand how they could scheme offense better against that defense. So, I think Fangio's right up there. I think that's the interesting thing, though, is like Bowen's defenses in Tennessee were awesome against the run and not very good against the pass. Part of that was an attempts thing. And how much do you then draw that back to the offense? And be like, yeah, they were terrible offensively for almost the entire time. So no kidding, they were not great against the pass. Teams just knew they could run it up real quick or just, get it up on the scoreboard. And then the Tennessee offense was going to have a shot at getting back. So they were willing to take a little bit more risk on that side of the ball. So I think it's interesting then you look at him, you look at what we don't know exactly what Joe Witt is, but if it's anything close to what he and DQ did together in Dallas in different roles, like that's a really strong group. And then Mike Zimmer was thought of as one of the best defensive coordinators in football and then took the head coaching job with the Vikings. And he's one of those like borderline head coach, amazing coordinator types. So who knows what he does in Dallas with that talent and in a very different style than what Dan Quinn did, or a different style at the very least than what Dan Quinn did with that same talent the last couple of years.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, maybe a better way to articulate that Giants-Philly debate, I think if I had to win now, I'd probably take the Giants. If I had to win over the next 3 years, I'd probably take Philly. You know what I mean? Like, and that's kind of like, I think, a good way to characterize it. And I think I'm really glad you brought up Dallas as kind of in the mix. And again, they have, maybe the best defensive player in football, depending who you talk to, in Micah Parsons. I'm really curious to see, how effective he is without Dan, and without that defensive structure and without that creativity in terms of usage. And again, I think Zimmer's a really smart guy. I think his third down pressure package, talk about kind of paving the way for the NFL. Like, he's one of those cornerstone guys that I remember watching him kind of work his like that AA look that, that was probably in 2011. And then everybody was running it by 2013 or 14. And so, again, he's had an impact very similar to Vic Fangio. But how has he evolved? How has he grown? What does his defense look like now? Does it still have that aggressive element to it? It'll be really fun to watch. But again, I think, to your point, really smart guy. And again, Micah Parsons, Dexter Lawrence, I don't know if they have the depth. I think part of the reason is because that interior defensive line play over the last 2 years for Dallas has been so inconsistent. I don't feel great about it. I'd almost rate Washington ahead of them because their defensive interior is a little bit better, but I can't get past the Micah Parsons thing. Honestly, he's just such a dominant player. So
yeah. All right. So you would go New York, Philly, Dallas, Washington.
Yeah, and again, like, the New York Philly thing's kind of 1A, 1B, but
yeah,
I think if I had to win this year, I'd probably go New York, I think.
Yeah, I think Washington's tough just because if all of a sudden one of these edge guys pops, and John and Duran have like revert to Pro Bowl form, like, Washington could easily finish the season as the best one. I think that it's just hard. I think it's hard to think that that's going to happen, considering the guys they brought in are vets. Like, Dorrance Armstrong is a very, very good player, but there's not like a young unknown edge player that all of a sudden you're like, wow, that guy could break out. I guess the wild card would be like a Jamin Davis, right? Does Jamin all of a sudden become this stud pass rusher? And we count him as a defensive lineman by week 7, and that's changed the equation. That would kind of be Washington's path to the top. But certainly Washington's D-line should be a part, should be a part of a very solid defense top to bottom.
Yeah, and I also think it's important to note, like, with the defensive line, Dorrance Armstrong specifically, like, he was relatively productive in limited snaps last year. So what does he look like as, playing a little bit more? Like, can he get to that double-digit number? Obviously, the way you paid him, you probably think he can. And you think he brings good leadership and good diversity to the front. And then, like you said, does, Andre Jones or KJ Henry, do they find a way to get to 7 sacks, which would be great in terms of production? So there is a pathway. I just think there's more questions with Washington. And again, that's the whole point of this exercise, right? It's like, there are, I think they all have good football players. I just think, like, with those top 2 teams, there's not a lot of questions. Then you get to Dallas and you say, well, that interior, while they have talented, like Mozzie Smith I really liked him coming out. He didn't play that way last year. Didn't play like a first-round draft pick last year.
No, not
but they still have 2 excellent guys on the edge. And you get to Washington, there's still more questions. John and Duran are coming off down years. I think that's probably coaching related and snap related in terms of playing too many snaps. But, it's all a little bit speculative in terms of, can they bounce back to that level of production we're accustomed to? And I think they can. But I think that's why, you kind of, the more questions you are, the further you are down the list. So that's why Washington.
For sure. And, the young guy that could pop and change things, Johnny Newton, plays that on the interior as well. So we'll see, obviously, how he is.
And sorry, we're talking through it. I think another guy that we're going to talk about here in a second is Frankie Louvu.
Yep.
And he might be that guy that's the 8.5 to 11.5 sack guy this year. And again, that would really change the dynamic and the perception of this defense.
All right, that is from Take Command, the full episode, which will include thoughts on Frankie Louvu and the linebackers. Does Washington not only have the best linebacking core in the NFC East, but maybe the entire NFL? That on Take Command, out first thing tomorrow morning in your podcast feed. Subscribe, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the free Odyssey app, or check us out on YouTube, full episodes at the Team 980. When we get back, we wrap up the show with real things real people said in real microphones, as we're done at 6:45 tonight ahead of the final game of the College World Series. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Anthony, I gave you the full screen for the fist pumps, and then you stopped fist pumping. Anthony was getting it to Avicii coming out of break.
I love me some Avicii.
So good. Yeah! Party Anthony seen for the second time this weekend.
Oh, man.
You look like you had a time in Rhode Island, sir.
I did have a time. Showed off a little dance moves. I can't really explain the dance move, but yeah, I tried. The effort was there. The
You just let the spirit move you.
Yeah.
/ the beat move you.
Yeah. I think that's what happened.
Trevor Noah, I think this is in a Netflix special by now, so I'm not ruining Trevor Noah's material, but he had a really, really funny bit about dancing. And he's like, black people, we dance to the beat, to the rhythm. And he's like talking about the culture of like drums in Africa and the whole thing. And he's like, one time one of my white friends, I was like, what are you doing? You can't dance. And he's like, no, Trevor, you just look at it wrong. We don't dance to the beat. We dance to the lyrics. And he does like a whole bit where he's like dancing to, I don't know, it was like some 80s song, I think. And it's so funny. And now that I've told all of you this, you, Anthony, and everybody listening, you'll never go to a wedding the same again.
No.
Sometimes Rachel and I, we haven't been to a lot of weddings. Just, I don't know. We met and got married in between the times when people typically get married.
Oh.
Like, we missed all of our friends who got married younger. And then we're about to have a wave of friends who are getting married like in their 30s. We have like 3 or 4 in the next couple of years, we're pretty sure. Some we're definitely sure. Some were like, they've been dating and it's going well. I think they'll get engaged soon. So we'll have to report back on the dancing to the beat versus the lyrics.
Yes.
At upcoming events in the next couple of years. Anyway, just keep that in the back of your mind. And if that's not in a Trevor Noah Netflix special yet, it could be soon. So anything else that we have to cover on the show today before we get to real things?
I think tomorrow we're going to probably do the Olympic trials since we didn't talk too much about it today.
Yeah. Amazing, by the way. So here's what to watch for. What? Remember that on SportsCenter? What to watch for?
Yeah.
U.S. Olympic trials schedule. Tonight, you have... Scroll. Today is Monday, June 24th. The discus throw for the women as soon as coverage gets started. But the first big event you'll see on NBC tonight is the 110-meter hurdles. That is the first round. But then you immediately go into the high jump final for the women, the long jump for the men, the 1,500 final for the men. That'll be a great race. You got the first round of the women's 3,000-meter steeple. Unfortunately, the best racer for the Americans for the last decade, Emma Coburn, is out with an injury. You have the heptathlon 800 tonight, the heats, or I guess that's really just their heats of doing it. Anna Hall, who, do you know the Washington Commanders adjacent Anna Hall fun fact?
No.
So Anna Hall's sister is Benjamin St. Juste's wife. So... Okay. American favorite / gold medal contender in the heptathlon, as long as her injury continues to heal and it is at the pace it's been going now, she's continuing to set season's best. Anna Hall from the University of Florida, a couple years ago graduated, and world-class heptathlete. She's the sister-in-law to Benjamin St. Just. So there's your fun fact for the heptathlon. The 400-meter men's final, circle back to that in a second. Then you got the 5K men's final, the 5,000-meter, the 5K women's final, and the 800 women's final tonight. So Athing Mo is the favorite there, who, of course, won the Olympics back in Tokyo. So the 400-meter men's final tonight should be called the 400-meter men's and boys final because Bullis High School's very own Quincy Wilson, who is 16 years old, said today, I don't really know when I'm going to get my driver's license. He made the final. And it is so funny to watch, Anthony. And I mean this in a sincere way. The 400 meters is a behemoth distance. It is a full quarter-mile sprint, one lap as fast as you can. No holding back anything. The splits are like high 10s, low 11 seconds. Like it is barely slower than they run the 100. They just do it 4 times. It's gross. They all want to die after. And so being strong is very helpful. And having a longer stride is very helpful because you have to take less over the course of the 400 meters. If it takes me 150 steps to go 400 meters and it takes you 130, that's a huge advantage. One, all of my steps are probably more powerful and stronger, and 2, I just have to take less of them. Quincy is out there, not in his grown man body yet. Just looks scrawny and small, and he's out there, and it looks like a kid made his way onto the track until you realize that kid is running just as fast as those grown men. And he is realistically probably not a contender tonight to make the team as an individual. Michael Norman will be the favorite, who's the reigning American champion. And it's, I don't know if he's the reigning world champion, but he is a former world champion. I believe he won in 2022 when the the World Championships were in Eugene at Hayward Field, where the Olympic trials are being held this fortnight, if you will. But he's going to make the team as an alternate, and will make the team, or not necessarily as an alternate, but as a member of the 4x400 team. So just by making the final, he's probably going to Paris. But he made the final, and at 16 years old, wow. Is this when you make the team or make it this far, this young, and you still have this much puberty ahead of you? You're talking about a kid who could break the world record one day. He had a great soundbite, Anthony. I don't know that we cut it, but depending on how things go tonight, maybe we will have this tomorrow during Real Things. He said it'd been like 40-something years since someone broke the U20 record, and he broke it on back-to-back nights. So, Quincy, from all of us here in D.C., as you wear your Bullis High School track uniform at the U.S. trials and run your final race tonight, good luck. We are pulling for you, and very much are hoping to see you break that record for a third time tonight, and let the chips fall where they may.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5-11, not very good.
Set into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
All right, it was intro day for J.J. Redick and the Lakers. There's a couple sound bites that have gone viral, including J.J. when asked about the expectations and proving people wrong, saying, I frankly don't give a word that I can't say on the radio. As for the idea that he and LeBron have been scheming this all along with the podcast that they did, here was Redick.
LeBron and I did not talk about the Lakers job until Thursday afternoon, about 30 minutes after I was offered the job. And that was very intentional on both our parts. I knew I had an understanding that he did not want to be involved in this. And for me, I didn't want to go down the path of hypotheticals with someone that I consider a friend and someone that I have a great amount of respect for. So for us, it just came down to literally Thursday afternoon. And I talked to him for about 15, 20 minutes and got off the phone.
That's so interesting because, like, there's a part of me that's like, I feel like you heard someone in the background go, come on. There's a part of me that's that. There's a part of me that goes, I think that when you're in that situation, that's the right play. And you just go, we're not going to talk about this. And whether it's stated or unstated. And then you, of course, like, if you're going to take the Lakers job, you want to talk to LeBron. So before you accept it, you certainly want to have that conversation. But I actually believe that from Redick. Amazing weekend. We were just talking about the Olympics. Simone Manuel back on the Olympic team, regaining her form. She had a disappointing Tokyo Games, but back, won the 50-meter free, and this was her afterwards.
Here, just shaking your head with a big smile. It looked like you were surprised at the end of that race, were you?
Yes and no. I put in a lot of work to get to this point. I wasn't feeling too confident after last night. I spent a lot of time watching races where I won. I really wanted to channel that Simone because I know I'm a winner. And that's what I did tonight. So it's crazy. It's really special how things turned around in 24 hours and how I continue to trust in God. So I'm really thankful.
The actualization that athletes do of watching their own highlights is actually really cool to me. And Simone Manuel, great to have her representing the U.S. again. And last but not least, representing the broadcast team, Snoop Dogg calling the steeplechase last night.
What we're about to see right now, they're about to get to dipping, ripping, riding, slipping, and hopefully not sliding, jumping over this hurdle. In the water. Oh, get up out of there. Oh, they coming behind him 7, 8 deep like horses. I love it. Bunched in and they running slow, but oh, he jumped on the top of the hurdle. You can do that? That was a cold trick right there. I like that one.
Amazing. We'll see you tomorrow.